welcome to our world. Another community is in mourning because of deadly gun violence, this time in Nashville, where 3 students and 3 adults were killed at Covenant Elementary School.
It's been very trying for me. I've done this for 35 years, as you said, and I have trained and we've trained and we prepare, but you never want to see this day happen. And when it did, it's just been exhausting.
Gun violence is now the leading cause of death for young people in the US. I spoke with Jayden Speed, a high school senior in Nebraska, who's also a volunteer with Students Demand Action. It's an organisation that launched its national initiative after the tragedy in Parkland, Florida. The group calls for meaningful action, not thoughts and prayers. Students Demand Action now has more than 600 groups across the country. Jayden and I discussed gun violence, gun control, and how the nation moves forward. Hello, Jayden. Thank you for joining me. As a student, how are you feeling after the news out of Nashville yesterday?
Well, I have to say that as a student, I'm feeling pretty angry today. Angry that our lawmakers have continued to pull back on our existing gun laws and have refused to take necessary action to implement common sense gun laws that would prevent tragedies like what we saw in Nashville yesterday and like we've seen throughout this year and throughout the last few decades with this epidemic of gun violence in the United States.
Yeah. What is it? What do students want lawmakers to know about gun control, gun safety, and gun access?
It's not about gun control, it's about common sense gun laws. It's about ensuring that we have a framework of legislation in the United States and all 50 states that keeps guns out of the hands of people that intend to harm themselves or others. We need legislation in the United States that will close loopholes, that will ensure universal background checks. We need red flag laws to allow law enforcement, family members to alert authorities to someone that is experiencing a crisis that may use a firearm to harm themselves or others. We need safe storage. We need a plethora of legislation to address this epidemic, to prevent tragedies like we saw in Nashville.
How has the work with Everytown impacted the conversation and the reality of gun access and gun violence in your community?
I got involved with Everytown and Students Demand Action after the Parkland shooting, Parkland school shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in 2018. And Students Demand Action, Everytown have worked tirelessly to address this public health crisis in the United States. Unfortunately, in many states, lawmakers are rolling back current gun laws. Tennessee recently instituted permitless carry, and they're now trying to extend permitless carry to people even at 18 years of age. In my home state of Nebraska, lawmakers are currently trying to implement permitless carry. But it's not all bad. Everytown has worked on the national level with the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act that was passed through Congress and signed by President Biden to help address some of this epidemic and institute some prevention.
And how do you heal after something like this? How do you heal within your community after each incident of mass gun violence?
You know, it's really tragic that young people, that communities like Nashville, like Parkland, like Uvalde, Sandy Hook, so many communities across our nation have been have had to experience what has happened, that have all had this common experience of tragedy. These communities are going to be suffering for a long time. They will always have this They will always have this label of being another city, another school where a mass shooting took place. And that is truly a tragic thing. Um, these communities, some of them have turned towards activism, towards addressing this crisis, towards trying to prevent the next Parkland, the next Uvalde, the next Sandy Hook from happening in another town, to another community, to another school.
And how are you doing that? What do you suggest we implement to intervene and prevent gun violence, in our schools?
There is a common sense framework of gun laws that we need in this country, and that includes universal background checks. There are current loopholes for gun shows, there are loopholes in purchasing firearms in states around the country that allow people who otherwise would be prohibited from purchasing a firearm to get their hands on a deadly weapon. We need red flag laws across the United States, and we need a federal red flag law to allow law enforcement and family, as I mentioned, to alert the proper authorities to remove firearms from the hands of people who will be using them to hurt themselves or others. We need to address the proliferation of assault weapons and high capacity magazines in the United States. There is so much more that goes into gun law legislation, but these are first steps in addressing this crisis.
And how do you suggest for anyone watching this to push for, stronger gun legislation?
There are a number of organizations, every town included, that is working on the front lines to address this epidemic, to address this public health crisis. I would encourage students, most definitely, to get involved in their local communities, to start chapters of Students Demand Action, to contact their lawmakers. I have been a person that has been able to testify, and here in my home state, I've been able to talk with my state senators, and students everywhere can do that. There's nothing special ability that you have to have in order to advocate. You just have to stand up and say that this epidemic is not, should not continue. And you can get involved with a number of organizations, and at your local level, your school board, your state legislature, and all the way to the federal government.
So any school can do this, and they should start. What advice do you have to students in schools today?
A lot of students are feeling, I want to say, apathetic to the fact that we continue to see a proliferation of gun violence in the United States, not just mass shootings, but everyday gun violence, suicide by firearm, domestic violence involving firearms. These affect communities and schools and students in so many ways. Students really need adults in their lives, politicians, from their local level to their state level to their federal level, to back them up when they say that something's wrong, to back them up when they say that enough is enough, and that we need change here in the United States.
Thanks for watching Our World. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit advocatechannel.com for the latest news.